to today's conversation about this topic, leanshoring. It's a term that perhaps you've not heard before, but it's one that describes what we believe could be a very significant shift in American manufacturing strategy, maybe the most significant shift in many, many decades. So we're excited to talk about that with you here today. It goes without saying, of course, we're living through a period of profound disruption. Supply chains that seemed robust in 2019 proved fragile. Geopolitical tensions have made distant manufacturing a liability. AI and automation are changing work, everyone's work, and causing us to reimagine what's possible. And increasingly, companies are asking, what did we lose when we moved production overseas? What are we still losing? Some companies are responding by simply bringing production back. That's what we call reshoring. But our guests today represent something better, a business model that integrates product development, supply chain, manufacturing, delivery, and service as close to the customer as possible. But this is not proximity for its own sake, but proximity that enables rapid feedback loops, customer partnership, and fundamentally different value creation. So we're excited to explore all of that over the next hour. So I'm joined today by Jim Womack. Many of you will know, perhaps all of you will know, LEI's founder, co-author of The Machine That Changed the World and Lean Thinking, along with several other titles. And Jim is who's responsible for this term, leanshoring. He's coined it to describe this approach that we want to explore today. Jim's been studying GE appliances pretty intensively and is in the process of drafting a case study about their lean transformation that we're excited to share with you, and I think you'll get a lot of value from. Also with Jim and I is Kevin Nolan, President and CEO of GE Appliances, a hire company. Under Kevin's leadership since 2017, GE Appliances is investing a whopping $6.5 billion in U.S. manufacturing, and in the process becoming the #1 appliance company in the U.S. But as you'll hear, this isn't just a reshoring story. It's about rethinking how manufacturing, innovation, and customer engagement can work together. So here's our plan for today. First, Jim's going to talk a little bit about this concept of leanshoring. Kevin will react, share his kind of initial response to Jim's theory. After we hear from Kevin, then the three of us are going to have a conversation. And then after that, we'll bring you into it. So many of you have already begun to use the comments function to introduce yourselves, tell us where you're joining us from. You'll use that same feature in this platform to submit your questions. So please, at any time, you can submit your questions. We'll be collecting those, and I'll channel your voice later on in this webinar, posing those questions to both Jim and Kevin. Okay, so that's our plan for the next hour. Maybe just briefly, I want to introduce or overview the Lean Enterprise Institute. If by chance you don't know, we were founded by Jim Womack, who's joining us today. And for about 30 years, we've been what we like to say, bridging theory and practice with ideas that are really rooted in the Toyota production system, the Toyota way. And kind of simply put, we help leaders build high-performing, problem-solving organizations through coaching and various systems for their work. You can, of course, learn much more about the Lean Enterprise Institute, the work we do, by visiting us at lean.org. Okay, with that out of the way, Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can talk to us a little bit about leanshoring.
Okay, great. What do we mean? Well, it's simply transferring value-creating activities for a given group of customers. And in this case, of course, it's U.S. customers that have been conducted offshore back to the U.S. and doing this profitably, I must emphasize profitably, by employing lean thinking in practice. So reshoring, which is bringing things back, plus lean, which is doing things the right way when they bring them back, equals lean shoring. It's a term we started using first writing I did about this was in 2003. That is a long time ago. And after 2010, got very frequently mentioning it, and it still has been a tough pull. If you do the next slide, Josh. So we need a two-step process here. First, you have to calculate the total cost of given activities in their offshore location versus those costs in the US. Turns out that's not quite so easy to do as most people have wanted to believe. And then second, you have to calculate the cost savings from employing lean methods when you bring things back. And then you put those two together and you can determine if the US location is competitive for leanshoring. We're not advocating that people do anything that isn't going to make the business successful. We're simply saying that you need to do a bit of calculating to make sure you're really doing the right thing. Next. So why do we advocate this? And now, and many offshoring decisions made, now this is going back 50 years, fail to calculate total cost very realistically. By the way, the first I looked at was the maquilas in Mexico, and that's 50 years ago. And then things went very rapidly from there. Most offshoring decisions made over the last 50 years also fail to consider the potential cost savings, lead time reduction, quality improvement available right here from deploying lean thinking principles and methods. Next. So how did this happen? Well, we know that U.S. manufacturing companies were feeling cost pressure, that logistics costs were falling with containerization. We also know that purchasing organizations often, usually, almost always included only piece part price plus slow freight when they were looking at the cost calculation. And they love this because their KPI was purchase price variance for any buyer. And you quickly get great numbers on purchase price variance if you find a place with low labor cost and you don't have to count any additional cost. And so moving offshore was a no-brainer, which is to say, if you didn't have any brains, well, it was easy to justify it. Next. But there were a lot of costs left out, and you can look through that list. The thing that I haven't listed there, actually, just noticing, was that when you start to move everything off, you lose all of your skills. So you don't know how to run production anymore. You don't know how to do manufacturing engineering. You don't know how to do PC&L the way you need to do it to work for you. And so there's this big number of items that need to be added to the cost, plus the slow freight, piece price cost. Go ahead, next one. But wait a minute, there's more. There's currency risk. There's connectivity cost. From many sorts. There's company risk, and that's not just your supplier stealing your IP, that's that they go out of business or disappear. We now know there's country risk. If you've been purchasing from the Ukraine, you get the idea. And of course, now we have tariffs. So lots and lots of costs there that weren't part of these offshoring calculations. Next. And the additional costs fall mostly on other parts of the organization, right? And here's the real problem, that of those costs that I've listed, a lot were hard to estimate. I was talking 25 years ago to people about, do you think you're really in a stable trading situation? If you have these enormous offshore efforts, isn't there going to be a political reaction? And the answer was no. Or if there is, we don't know how to calculate it. And that was the key thing. So when you don't know how to calculate something, you write the cost as zero. So you've got a currency risk problem, and you've got a country risk problem, you've got a company risk problem, you've got a tariff risk. You write all those as zero because we don't know how to calculate them. And for a while, everything does proceed as these companies had hoped. Next. And painfully for us, most executives in the US, way back when, had no idea how to calculate the advantages of lean thinking. They didn't know of an example. And so again, they wrote those advantages to zero. So off they went to low-cost locations, low-wage locations, not low-cost necessarily. And then there were tariffs. And here we are today. Next. Now, fortunate fact, we've got a great example of successful leanshoring in the case of the GE appliance company headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky, whose CEO, Kevin, is with us today. But this is not something they did since the new tariff regime came in. This is something they started more than 15 years ago and have been very, very steadily working at this because they changed their logic. They learned how to calculate total cost, and they learned to see the advantages of lean if they could do it. And then they've had constancy of purpose in doing it. And to me, one of the most impressive things is that there have been 3 CEOs involved in this time. There have been 2 owners. They have an American owner in the General Electric mother company, and they've had a Chinese owner for the last 10 years. And yet they have been able to stay totally on course, methodically continuing, when most companies can't get through one CEO and one owner without everything changing, and they totally lose a sense of where they're going. And then equally impressive to us, they have deployed the lean part through their entire organization to create a lean enterprise system. And that is lean product and process development. It's fulfillment from order through production to delivery, not just production, but from order through to delivery, and supplier alignment and improvement, and a lean management system, which is to say basic stability, improvement management, and Hoshin management for the big leaps that they have to make, and with a strong focus on innovation. What GE grasped was that if you brought commodities back and tried to make money here just with the same commodity products that you were offshoring before, it was going to be hard work. You needed also to innovate, which is kind of the third piece of the puzzle. Next. So, is there an opportunity here for the US, for us? Well, I think if the GE appliances example, which I'm writing up, which we would like to widely publicize, is widely copied, I do think we'll have a better and more stable society. And hey, just me saying it, but I kind of think we need a little more stability in the society at this point. And this would help. However, cautionary tale here, if reshoring is done without lean, just bring it back and do it the way you did it before. Bring it back, but just do it how you did it before. The most likely consequence behind tariff barriers, behind a moat, tariff moat, is just going to be inflation and stagnation. And that's not going to help stability at all. So that's how we think about leanshoring. That's why we advocate leanshoring. By the way, we don't take a position on tariffs. We don't have any politics in this. Tariffs are what they are. Apparently they change every day, but they are what they are. And so therefore, this is something that we think is good behavior for the long term. And it does, however, require quite a lot of work. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim, for walking us through that. So Kevin, what say you to Jim's comments about this concept of reshoring or leanshoring?
Well, I think Jim ended it well with, it takes a lot of work. And I think that's something that sticks with me. And, you know, as you go through it, I think the difficulty in all this is you'd only learn by doing. I mean, that's one of the things, no matter what you want to read and how you want to try to practice, until you actually start doing this and start a transformation, that's the day the learning starts. Well, to have that learning, you got to start reshoring. You got to start bringing things back. And, you know, you look back at our time in 2008 when we really started into this. I was in design engineering at the time. I totally underestimated the complexity of manufacturing and how far our skill set had slipped and how much we had to learn. And I think there, you know, the thing that's helped us was actually seeing some others that maybe had been farther in a transformation, like a Herman Miller and others, that we were able to say, hey, this is possible, and start some of those calculations that Jim talked about. Because it's very hard on paper, and I think his talk was perfect of why a lot of this left. We miss a lot of these hidden costs. And to really start looking at what would your operation have looked like if you had instead of offshoring, if you really embraced the lean transformation, how good could you be? And I still don't think we're nearly how good we can be. And I think that's this journey, Jim calls it perseverance. But it's one where with continuous improvement, you keep getting faith that we can get better, and it kind of builds on itself. And I think that's the journey we've been on for quite some time right now, of really saying, hey, how do we get better? How do we every month, learn from doing, keep improving, keep getting better at this thing, and have the confidence it is the right thing to do. We've seen when you do it right, it works and the results are tremendous.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. So let's make a transition now. I've prepared some questions for the two of you that we'll walk through. Just another plug to our audience that here's an opportunity for you to interact with Jim and Kevin with questions that might be on your mind related to this topic, and just curiosity you might have of the path that GE Appliances has been on now for quite a while. But to get things started, we'll start with my questions. I've got the microphone here. So selfishly, let's get into it. So Kevin, I want to start with you. We've heard from Jim now, more than we've heard from you. So you've said that when you started at GE Appliances in 1997, that offshoring was a dominant strategy. It was really assumed at that time that America was, evolving or just simply becoming a service economy. So I'm curious what's changed in your thinking over the years. When did you start to see the costs of that approach beyond what perhaps you were aware of when you got started in 1997?
Yeah, I'd say, it actually started before that, Josh. If you look, I, joined the General Electric company in 89. And I'd say from 89 to 97, in the division I was in, all I saw was offshoring starting, where we had a lot of U.S. manufacturing, either moving overseas, moving down to Mexico. And it's really started wondering what's the future look like if you're an engineer without manufacturing. And that drew me over to the appliance business. It was known at that time, I would say, for offshoring in kind of a different way. And the first things that went were microwaves, window air conditioners, et cetera. And that's what I got into. And I'd say I had the delusion at the time that we could make this work and that we could work with overseas suppliers and develop innovative products and then bring them back into the States. But what I saw happen from 97 until I would say the financial crisis was just a continue, of 2008, a real degradation in our capabilities. So our manufacturing facilities that remained continued to get worse. They weren't getting better. Gave more incentive to offshore. And then the people that we had worked with and that we had spent a lot of time, bringing technology to, developing, and really getting to the standards of what needed to be in the US, we were developing competitors. And instead of developing ourselves, we were developing others that in the end had manufacturing right by, had the design engineering, and really built a better skill set than the one that we kind of walked away from. And I saw that a future where if we kept going on that path was going to be a dark future. And, is it really, we talked back then that this, dream of a service economy, you don't need manufacturing. And I think people started seeing the weaknesses of that in the 2000s, that it doesn't work. You can't have a society built just on service. For a lot of reasons, we need manufacturing. So we said we've got to get on it. I think that's when we reached out to a lot of people and realized we have a lot of learning to do. And we started down that journey.
So in 2014, you described GE Appliances at that time, so whatever it was, a decade ago, a dozen years ago, as stagnant with no significant innovation. As you just mentioned, the 2008 crisis exposed some of the, what you had lost in terms of capability and experience. I'm curious how that crisis, 2008, really shaped your view of where manufacturing needed to be, maybe in particular as it relates to this capability for innovation.
Yeah, so I think in 2008, we really realized, okay, we've got to bring things back. It just wasn't working out well for us. We saw our our position in the market continuing to erode, and people we had worked with continuing to grow. So we knew that the strategy was wrong. But when you build a new factory, you build a new plant, what really scared me is that plant, that's a 20-year investment. And you look at appliances, it's not pure fashion, but if you look at that every decade, it's totally different, right? What we're producing. So when I looked at it, I said, oh shoot, we're bringing in these factories that are going to last 20 years. And we all had the idea of what we're going to build in them year one. But do we have 20 years of products that are going to keep? Because it's a lot of responsibility. When you put a factory in, you hire thousands of workers, that's livelihoods you're putting in there. That's, people that have to take care of families. It's not something that you can just quit tomorrow and feel good about yourself. So how are we going to keep these things vibrant? How are we going to keep, these things? Because I thought what really happened was we stopped innovating, and then it's easier to offshore this stuff because profitability goes, et cetera. So we really thought, and we took a lot of the lean lessons and looked at how we were innovating and said, that's really kind of the same old style, that way we were manufacturing. And we got very much into co-creation, open innovation, and said, we're going to do that totally different also. And we took that out of the secret chambers of a corporate world and started working with our users and working with consumers, customers, and makers. And realizing that just like in manufacturing, we need to get new ideas, and ideas can't come from internal, they should come externally. So we kind of flipped innovation on its head, and that's been another terrific story. But it's kind of like lean. It's one where you got to make some leaps of faith that, protecting things isn't the best, that getting user feedback and being on the front line and sharing and learning, it's a better way to innovate. And I think we've proven that so.
I like you talk about appliances aren't pure fashion necessarily. And yet, as we were talking about before this webinar, I was noticing the very fashionable 2-in-1 appliances that you're making for laundry and drying there at the trade show that you're at this week. And mentioning that I've now entered into a conversation with my wife about your beautiful olive green 2-in-1 washer dryer. Anyway, pure fashion, perhaps, even with appliances. So you touched upon something that a couple of people have asked about that I had a question about too, Kevin. Sort of this concept of zero distance between the customer and the company. You've said things like management needs to get out of the way. There's a couple of people that have asked, and I had a kind of a related question. Could you give us a concrete example where proximity to the customer, their involvement, that co-creation kind of concept came to life and created value for your customers and for the business?
Yeah, there's a lot of good examples, Josh. And I think it stems from, if you want to see what's going on, you got to go on the shop room floor. You got to go where the action is, right? Go to the Gemba. And the same is true with innovation. And probably our first real success that gave us the confidence was our Opal nugget ice maker, where it was really started by passionate people that were crazy about chewable ice. And I did not understand it. I had no clue. And it was one where no one understood, was there really a market? People knew that some restaurant quality ice, etc. But we were the first company to do crowdfunding at the time. And we really did that not to raise capital, but just to validate, because I thought nobody cared, right? And all of a sudden things starts taking off and people were super interested, and they start cheering for us to bring a product out, which was to me a whole new concept, right? Typically you're trying to convince people that your new product is exciting. We're here, it's everyone cheering us on, don't give up, we want this thing. And that to me was just an awakening like I'd never seen before, that, there's something special in that, of getting that direct feedback in a product development cycle. And it's much the same you need to get from the manufacturing floor. Where are the good ideas? They don't come from management, right? They're going to come from the people that are doing the work. And to us, it's the people that are using the products are where we're going to get our good ideas from. And that, I think, has been very successful. We keep trying to bring that culture throughout G appliances in this zero distance concept, because zero distance means that the people that should be in charge of your company are the people that are using your products, that they should be the one that are guiding you. They should be directing what do they want to see next, not corporate, not management. And that's a hard leap of faith for a lot of people to make. But it's, I'd say, no harder than the leap of faith that with Lean, we could bring things back profitably and build them in this country. And, the thing is, just try it and see where things go. And typically you'll like the results.
So being somewhat familiar with that example, the Opal ice maker, for those passionate ice chewers, could you talk about like the mechanism that you established in partnership with the University of Louisville? I'm talking about First Build, of course.
Sure.
And, a lot of people won't be familiar with First Build, of course. So, if you could talk a little bit about how that works. I know there's another example, another somewhat similar mechanism that you've set up, the co-create space in your hometown of Stanford. Anyway, if you could just talk about that and maybe speak a little bit to how First Build was inspired by Chelsea Hotel, the artists' commune in New York City, which for those that are familiar with Chelsea Hotel, they may find that quite interesting.
Yeah, so I'll start there. Growing up right outside New York City, I was always fascinated with that place. And if you look at the history of it, there's tons of innovation coming out of it, whether it's poetry, writing, goes all the way back, Mark Twain. You could go to modern music. Everything seemed to touch that space, a lot of American culture. And I wondered why, why was that? And I just thought it was a bunch of crazy people that got together. But then when I started doing research, it actually was architected to be a place where people would have collisions, would have to meet each other. And the thought was, if we can bring different kind of ideas and people together, just magic might happen. And I thought, well, could you ever have that in product development? I'd say the other one is Media Labs at MIT. Kind of was onto some similar thinking. And I was like, this could be interesting. So First Build, we got with the university campus, and we tried to get like a Venn diagram of people that loved appliances, people that were makers, and also passionate users. And is there a subset that we could get a community together of those kind of people, and what would happen? And we opened First Build more than a decade ago, and we started it with an art show. And everyone's like, what the heck you doing? And I still have a hard time explaining what First Build is. You can go online, anyone that's interested, you can go on YouTube. They have a channel, First Build, and follow along. And you'll see the latest of what they're working on, what they're thinking about. It's all out there. It's all transparent. You'll see the engineering struggles that go into product development. So a pretty cool site. But that whole concept just really radically changed thinking about what corporate's role are in innovation, what is management's role. And the more we got into it, I think management's role is to get out of the way and let people find what they're passionate about and how do we bring good things into the market. And it's really simple. And I think First Build's epitomized that. There's no one that can tell First Build what to work on. The only people that can dictate it are the crowd, the people that are watching it, that are cheering them on. And we've had more failures out of First Build than success, I'll tell you that. But the trick is they're not afraid at all of failing, because they've learned, how do you get out there and do experiments and do things. Before, we'd always put all this financial and these plans together and all this research into should we do something. And it's proven to me to be a total waste of time. And how many companies, that's all they spend their time doing in management, is whether they should approve something or not. So get out of the approval and start getting into the enable of people and their ideas.
So Jim, probably like me, you've had a chance to visit the First Build location. In fact, when we take people to go and see the lean transformation at GE Appliances, it's one of the stops that we like to make. I'm just curious what your take is on it. To me, it's among the more amazing business innovations I've ever come across. I'm just curious what your perspective on it is.
Well, the whole idea, as just stated, is let's get some interested people with some enthusiasm. And they've also got some different knowledge. different ways of thinking about things, and let's just get them together and say, hey, what do you think you could do here? So it's fun. And you go out, and there are a number of these first bills now, and it's pretty chaotic. And here's some people over here working on something that you say, what's that? And they say, well, we're not quite sure, but it's really interesting. So like, okay, I guess I'm good that I'm not a conventional manager. I would want to immediately say, well, how much are you going to spend, and when's the product going to be delivered, and so forth. And that's not the atmosphere at all. So, but these are serious people. This is not just goofing off. These people are, they're professional innovators, and they've got a method, and they know what they're trying to do. And so what's not to like? And you could imagine that it then becomes suddenly this wonderful product that everybody in the whole world wants. Well, then that's the next phase of problem solving, of how are we going to make this thing for everybody in the world, which is very different from how are we going to get to the minimum viable prototype. How are we going to demonstrate with real human beings that there's real joy that comes from having this contraption? And so it's what has been missing in much of conventional corporate. And this is an attempt to do some innovation on innovation, right? And that's not, you don't go out to a first build and here they're working on the next generation of washing machine. No, they've got some conventional engineers doing conventional product enhancement, product improvement. But hey, maybe we don't want to wash stuff. Maybe we want to do Lord knows what with our clothes. That's what the people over in First Bill want to talk about. Okay, so that's not to say that the need to do conventional product development from a point where you've got a product that you've shown, it works and people really like it. Okay, so let's not get all of the traditional engineers out there terrified. No. There's still plenty of work for them. But what you need is a front end that's closer to the customer. That indeed, ideally, the customer's right there. They've got the drill and the hammer and the wrench and so forth, saying, "Hey, well, why don't you make it shape like this?" So that's the difference, and that's what they've added here as a dimension. That particularly in established companies, they, as we all know, tend to become less and less innovative. And this is a successful attempt to reverse the ossification.
So, Kevin, maybe you can, building off Jim's comments, and again, I've been scanning the questions coming in through the comments. There was one question in particular that expressed interest in learning about lean product and process development that's been happening at GE Appliances. So we've talked a little bit about this, very innovative space known as First Build and the value that brings to the business. Could you talk about your other kind of product development activities and what lean product and process development has brought to the organization? For those that may not know, before you assumed the role of CEO, you were Chief Technology Officer, correct? And among your responsibilities was engineering and product development. So you had a first row seat as to that part of the transformation. Could you talk about that?
I say it all ties together in many ways, because like some of the experiments we tried to do down at First Build was kind of a frustration with the old waterfall development process, and all the handoffs. And we looked at the efficiency of what we were doing in product development, and especially when it went from engineering into manufacturing, there wasn't this continuous feedback loop that is so necessary, and it's almost built into waterfall thinking. And a lot of us were trained on that, and we were brought up on that. And, but we saw two worlds going on. We saw software working one way and hardware working the other. And software seemed to be a lot more collaborative and nimble and agile, the word. So we got into a lot of it is, can we bring the speed and the iterations of agile into big product development? And it's kind of what Jim's saying. There's still a lot of need for engineers. I think that's another thing we can go down to is, as a country, we need a lot more engineers here. Mm-hmm. But the way that we brought lean into the product development was really on having obeas and having just a collaborative space where every day we're talking about what are the problems, what are the issues, what are the handoffs, And there's been a lot of help that we've got to plug for LEI of really helping us think through of all these inefficiencies in product development pretty much are from handoffs. And every time you have a handoff, you have a degradation of information, right? And what does the system look like where there aren't those handoffs? There not that loss of fidelity of information. And how much faster could you go of where you can do concurrent engineering in a smart way that's not a ton of risk? And that's what I'd say our product development's been all about, is how you make it a team sport. And not a sport that anyone has the lead on, but we're all we're all going for the same goal and same aim. A lot of times you got into optimizing your own metrics. Like you talked about sourcing. Everyone had their metrics. And their metrics didn't spell a great product for consumers, right? So how do we get the metrics that are really aligned with what we should be doing in corporate?
So one area of the business that I know has undergone significant transformation, significant lean transformation, we could say, is inside your factories, on the shop floor, the way you're making things. So we've touched upon first build, we've touched upon kind of product development, engineering to some degree. Could you talk a little bit about just the transformation that's been underway on your shop floor? And I know there have been kind of phases of it, hard lessons learned, pivots along the way. Anyway, if you could just overview that for us, and then maybe we'll explore that further.
I'd say a breakthrough came from that when Bill Good, who now runs manufacturing for us, he was working in one of our facilities and then came up to run all the manufacturing. And that facility he worked at, he really turned around. And it was amazing, not really that much from a design engineering standpoint, but from bringing lean methods into a plant. Something that went probably from one of our worst plants to our best plants. And that gave a lot of confidence that there's something special. But we had a lot of naysayers, a lot of doubters. And we had been working on lean, and everyone says, I know lean, because it is, on the surface, it is, the flaw is it's too simple. And it just sounds like you can learn it in a day, and boy, you can't. But Bill came up and gave a matrix of a lean IQ. And it was the first time I think someone really gave us an assessment of where we were on a lean journey. And we were really on step one, even though we thought we've been working 3-4 years. The General Electric company was saying we were like the best at lean. And this view of, we were really pretty bad. And we had a lot of work to do. And it wasn't in one space. It was kind of all over the place. That is what I think turned the corner for us. Because that spark of humility that got brought forward and us saying, you got to learn. And you know what, this isn't, you have a consultant come in and they tell you what to do and they walk away and you're smart. No, this is like learning an instrument. The only way is practice. And you got to keep at it, keep working at it, and keep improving. And you almost don't notice your improvement until you look back over a good length of time and you're like, wow, look at where we've come from.
So you talked about in that answer some, encountering some naysayers, some resistance, some belief that perhaps, at an individual level, a team level, the company level, you were maybe better or thought you were better perhaps than you really were. Again, being somewhat familiar with the story, could you talk a little bit about an experience that I know you went through yourself, but that many other executives and managers have gone through, this immersion experience on the shop floor, and just how that, how you experienced that, what you learned from that experience, what that's done amongst your management and executives to advance your transformation and just the business improvement that's been underway the last decade?
Yeah, I guess I'll go through two. One was a immersion that was planned, and that's where, as leaders, we all have to go out on the shop floor and actually improve a job. And to improve a job, you've got to go and you got to do the job. You got to study the job. You got to really understand the standard work. You got to understand the struggles of an operator. And then what do you do to improve it? And this we do over a week, a 2-week period. And it's a humbling thing to take something and make an improvement that the operator actually will do, because the operators, unless it's not a true improvement, they're not going to touch it. And everyone wants their work to get better. And I'd say that was an eye-opening of seeing as a design engineer how many problems I actually created instead of solved in what I was doing, because I didn't understand the work and I didn't really observe the work. Now, the one that I'd say was the best learning experience is COVID. Is when we couldn't get workers on the shop floor, we said, well, we're all going to pull together and we're going to go out and work. And, me as a CEO, all of salary, we were there, salary, hourly, we all had to work together. And that was a whole different experience, because if you're going to sit on a line 8 hours a day, 5 days, sometimes 6 days a week, you really got to know a job. And that gave me a whole different appreciation for, the work and what the people do and the value they create. And I'd say that it did two things. One, it was a good education, but culturally it helped a lot, is that salary hourly tension became a thing of respect. I think the hourly respected, okay, we still know actually how to work and we're not just the suits, talking. And we got a great respect for the hourly associates and what they do and how they do it. And I think that has to be a part of this, is there's got to be respect for the work and respect for the people doing the work.
Well, the other thing too, just to share with the audience, if they're unaware, that GE Appliances, at least there in Louisville, is a union organization too. So that, building that bridge between management, executives, and frontline team members, that kind of stuff is really important, hard, has its complications, especially in that environment that many other companies can relate to and whatnot. There's another concept I want to introduce, and here you talk a little bit about, Kevin, and then Jim, maybe a couple of questions for you, which is this concept of micro enterprises. So could you talk about that and its implementation here at GE Appliances in Louisville, and what value that's brought to the organization? I think we've, spoken to sort of the building blocks up until now, and then this is a fairly significant, as I understand it, as I've heard you talk about it, structure for the organization that I think is unleashing a lot of these capabilities you've been building and investing in for the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. We learned that from High Air. When they acquired us, they had this concept of zero distance. And the way they bring that to light is you got to get closer and closer to the customer, right? And that's why it's important that, we're based here in North America. We run the business because we know what the customers want the best, because we're here with them. And that's a philosophy of the company. But that zero distance also says you can't have a hierarchical management system. You want to break the company down to as small as segments you can that add value to the market and that work on the market. So we at first we broke down into 4 micro enterprise. Now I think we have 14, 15. And what's fun now is people start creating sub micro enterprises. So it's all about individuals seeing an opportunity that's out there in the market, and how do we make the team as small as possible so it's focused, it's dedicated, and it's passionate about what it's doing. And I think the more you get decisions flowing all the way up to a CEO and all the way back down into what you do in the market, it's slow, you're not nimble, and I think you miss a lot of signals out there. And in today's world, it's dynamic. I mean, I think organizations that are built on speed and built on nimbleness, and that's a lot of what I think why Lean gives you such an advantage in a manufacturing system, because you can change, right? You have this concept that there's constant change is actually healthy. And when you're not changing, you're not improving. And the micro enterprise, I think it removes the friction factor. It makes it much quicker to react out there.
Jim, I'm curious to hear from you. I mean, having been studying Lean and organizational structure and all that stuff for as long as you have been, your kind of take on this micro enterprises concept as you've seen it employed at GE Appliances?
Well, first off, I have to say there's no one right micro enterprises for everybody. And you're making a big mistake if you just want to do cut and paste. That you actually have to do discovery. And that's what they did. And the hire of this parent company had some ideas and some philosophy and said, okay, great, we hear that. That would be a good thing to do, but we've got to try it. And so they have been doing management development, if you will. And I don't mean managers, but I mean the system development with this concept for quite a while. And they've learned quite a lot. And so rather than say, let's send everybody over to Louisville and see what it is that GE Appliance did, may I recommend that you say, hey, why don't we try some experiments of our own? And then if we get to a point where we're just stumped, we're just not smart enough to figure this out, well, let's go see GE. But, I'm a long veteran of industrial tourism, and indeed have actually caused some industrial tourism. And the yield on industrial tourism is actually pretty low. If you haven't already tried to do some experiments and you're out looking for something better, as opposed to you don't know what to do, you want to find somebody who's done something, and then you go do it. And if it doesn't work, well, it's not your fault because you got it from these other guys, right? So it's there's some human nature here that has to be overcome. I just wanted to say one thing about reversing the trajectory here, that back when Kevin first came to GE, this company was just steadily shedding people. So you go out to the people and say, hey, we've got some ideas about productivity. Well, what the people hear is, oh, you can shed us even faster. And you go to the union and say, hey, why don't you work together with us? We're going to make this place productive. And by the way, we just moved one more product line off to Mexico or to China. So how about it? And of course, you're not going to get anybody who's going to do anything, but at best sit on their hands, and at worst try a little sabotage, just because they feel they aren't respected and they're being treated as objects rather than as people. So that was a magic of getting the wheel to stop spinning this way and to get it to spin this way. And then good things happen when you can do that. So I'm very impressed with the ability of the management to reverse the psychology so that they could be doing positive things rather than negative.
What have been some of the keys to, reversing that psychology, as Jim put it, Kevin?
I'd say it's the experiments, like Jim said. Do an experiment and see that you get a positive result. And it doesn't actually, the smaller the better, I think, right? Because a lot of them won't work and you don't want to do too much harm. So once you see something positive, okay, then can we scale it? Can we learn from it? Can we move it? But I think it's one of those ones, it's good to see others to give you some confidence, but until you start doing it and seeing what works for you and what doesn't work for you, because every industry is different, every market's different, customers are different, but the fundamentals, I think, are somewhat the same. Understand the work, get close to the work, and focus on that. But you got to just keep trying and learning. And I think that's what changed us, is having more of a learning organization. The pride had to leave us, and pride, I think, is one of the worst things for creating a learning environment, right? Humility, so that, I think, is how do you get humility brought into your organization, and not many have it.
So speaking of a space for experiments and learning, one of the questions that came in from Jim Mentone, if I pronounce that correctly, is asking Kevin for thoughts about AI and its use in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing specifically. He calls out, I know there is experimentation with AI in various ways happening in Louisville at Appliance Park. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. To me, that's one of the most exciting things I've seen, in my whole career. And I'm hugely optimistic about it. But I'd say what we're trying to do at G Appliances is maybe a little different than at most, is we're really trying to upskill the whole organization. Because to me, this is a new tool. And I think too often it's being centrally controlled. And because nobody knows how to use this tool yet. And if there was ever a time for experimentation, it's now. It's today, with where AI is going. Because anyone that says they know where it's going is wrong, because we don't even understand how it works right now. So we're putting it in the hands of everybody. So we built what we call an AI playground. And we use that as a term because go and play. And play means you can make mistakes and it's no harm, right? We're not watching what you're doing. We're not measuring you. But we're starting to celebrate wins. Like our distribution team's doing some amazing things. We're seeing, even in HR, we're seeing communications, we're seeing all over examples. And we run some contests. We've had co-ops are outperforming, I would say, people like me because they maybe understand quicker to learn the tool. But it's one where can the whole organization be learning, and can you not have someone controlling it? We need to be safe, right? But I think out of a lot of organizations' fear, they're not out there learning. And I think if you have an organization that embraces this new tool and really democratizes it, watch out. It's going to be dangerous. And to me, the whole key is you got to democratize AI. You can't have fiefdoms. It can't sit in your IT department. That is, I think, a huge mistake if IT is controlling the use of any tool. And maybe that's just me as an engineer. Put the tools in the hands of the people that do the work, and they'll figure out how to make the tool do the right thing.
So you frame that a little bit in terms of kind of skill building around this emergent technology, this new tool. Another question that came in earlier, and you touched upon this too with a statement you made about the lack of engineers that U.S. universities are producing and then feeding into companies like GE Appliances. But the question was from Daniel Tomaselli. What were some of the critical skills that you saw lacking when you began? He calls out tool and die makers specifically. How'd you build lean awareness in the workforce without tying everyone up for weeks in classrooms?
Well, first, I hate classrooms, so I typically avoid them at all costs. So maybe that's just in my nature. But you talk about these skills like tool and die. I think when I started at G, that's where I'd say my education in engineering was given by the tool and die makers, not the university, right? Because that's when you really started to understand how you make things, how things work. So I think in the country right now, you're hearing a lot of AI is going to take all the software jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But, especially what we do, we build things. We have to know how to stamp metal. We have to know injection mold. There's huge complexity that there's a lot of learning that needs to go on that. So it gets into, we've got to start doing programs. We got to start building factories. Every time I look at a program as an education. I mean, that's the classroom. When we're developing a new product, when we're doing a new experiment, when we're bringing in a new piece of equipment on the shop floor. And if you don't do those things enough, you're not going to get the practice because you can always do better. And to me, the way we can get, it'll be a dream of mine to see the tool and die makers come back to this country because we need them here. Because that's another, if you're doing engineering here and you're doing the manufacturing here and that tool's got to be sent overseas, that is not going to be an efficient way to make things work. So this is a whole package we've got to rethink and we got to relearn, and that's why apprenticeships and, we talk about engineers, but it's really not the right term. We need technical people that can solve technical problems. And what kind of education is necessary for that? It's varied, right? But I think we've all got to get at it.
Do you have any comments on this? Or, I guess maybe the final question that I had for you specifically was, as you've been witnessing the lean transformation, this leanshoring effort at GE Appliances over the last 10, 15 years, as you've been maybe studying it a little bit more closely recently and developing this case study, just curious what about it has maybe surprised you in learning about what Kevin and the team are doing there in Appliance Park?
Well, GE, along with General Motors, were the two iconic pioneers of what we now call modern manufacturing and mass production. And when I first went to see GE, which is almost 20 years ago now, down at Appliance Park, I thought I was looking at GM in the 1970s. It was all of the stuff that you had this hostile labor union relation. They were making big batches. Their metrics said you got to keep uptime. On our equipment, it's expensive. We've got to have uptime. And you went out in the plant and there are acres of rework areas. And it looks like there's as much rework as there is manufacturing. And everybody thinks this is pretty good. And of course, I came from a totally different world. And I think, well, wait a minute, everything is wrong here. This is hopeless. And by the way, I had spent some time at Fairfield, the headquarters of the General electric company as it was then, trying to convince them to at least try some of this lean stuff. And all they could do was 5-day Kaizen. That was the only thing they had any interest in. And it just drove me crazy. So I was, when I went to GE the first time, I said, well, here's another hopeless situation. And not only that, they're going to move it all offshore, and then they'll discover how well that works. And I guess I'll just wait. And so I did wait, and actually things came back around. But just two things I'd say, wrapping up, that again, I can't overemphasize the constancy of management. That when I first went down there, they had a CEO who was kind of a classic GE rotation guy. And the next time I came down, they had another CEO who was a GE, ship blank and ship, who was a rotation guy. And then they got to Kevin. And I said, whoa, this is really weird. They can actually stick to something. I mean, this is really interesting. And the mindset was experimental. We don't know what to do, actually. We've got some ideas. We're trying the ideas. Let me show you what we're trying to do. Kevin would show me things. So you can't replace that, this kind of continuity, that we're an experimental organization, that we believe you have to try things with your hands. You can't just talk, you got to do, that all experiments don't work. You heard about how the maker spaces, they don't expect everything to work. In the States, people would say to their reports, be brave, be bold, try amazing things. But by the way, don't screw up. Okay. So it just completely defeats the need to be innovative. Let me say one other thing about this, which is quite surprising. And I think everybody ought to know this. It's the dog bites man version of GE Appliance, that they were bought by a Chinese company in 10 years ago. And 100 Americans out of 100 would have said, oh my gosh, now they're going to totally gut the place and make everything in China. This is the end. And what happened was the exact opposite, that the hired guys actually believe you should be close to the customer. That's a philosophy. They actually believe that. And they walked in and said, we don't know what to do here. How can you succeed in this country? And you got to try some experiments. And we can't tell you what to do because we don't know what to do. We've got this micro enterprises idea, but otherwise, probably more than we do, certainly about your company and your country. And so they've actually been a steady Eddie that said, hey, let's sell this thing on a steady course. And the notion that you're bringing stuff back, that's good. That's not bad. And I think in this crazy tariff world we're in now, they're pretty glad that was the idea that they agreed to, because it's put GE in a much better position. That if you go back to the 80s when they were offshoring as quickly as possible, and suddenly we've got all these tariffs, they would have been dead. But now this is not easy. And this tariff thing requires a lot of hard work, but they're in a much better position to deal with it than they would have been in times past. So strange things happen. And so far, so good. And I'm busy trying to write their story up in a way that also talks about the hard part. A lot of you get into with writing corporate case studies is hagiography. That's Lives of the Saints. That everything was easy and they were perfectly pure and had virtuous thoughts and so forth. That's real life, of course. So I've been trying to write the real story, and we'll try to get this done as quickly as we can to share with everybody.
Well, whether it's been Kevin talking or other, colleagues of Kevin's at GE Appliances, I've never heard them tell the story where they didn't talk a lot about what's been challenging and hard and lessons learned and experiments run and quote unquote failures and all that kind of stuff. So I think you'll be safe there. Kevin, any final comment from you?
No, I think it's great to get the discussion out there, and all the people, thank you for the comments, because, this is hard, and I think we need to encourage each other as we go along it. So hopefully more people are going to get interested in bringing manufacturing back, and I think these kind of discussions hopefully are helpful in doing that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Jim. Just a few quick things for me before we wrap up here. Allison, if you wouldn't mind pulling the slides back up. Thank you. So I just want to make a plug. It is my duty, and I'm thrilled with what we have planned to take place in Houston, Texas in a matter of weeks for the 2026 Lean Summit. You can see some information about that here. GE Appliances, some of Kevin's colleagues will be there talking more about what they've been up to with their lean transformation, but many other companies will be there as well. We really hope to see you there. I'm of course biased, but I think we've designed and put together the best summit in LEI's history. So join us in Houston for that experience. It's also the case, whether you've registered already or may register in response to this pitch, that there are still hotels at our hotel rate available through this week. So act fast to be able to take advantage of that. And I hope to see you in Houston. Another thing that I wanted to mention, Jim gave a call out to industrial tourism and the risks of industrial tourism, and those are certainly real. At the same time, it is remarkable to go see what others are doing, take inspiration from that. Kevin himself talked about the importance of going to see, at the time, Herman Miller, now the company Miller Knoll, early on for the GE Appliances team and getting their lean transformation going. And so I just want to mention that about twice a year, LEI organizes what we call the Lean Leadership Learning Tour, where we visit several organizations, including Toyota, an automotive supplier, Summit Polymers, and GE Appliances in Louisville. And so there's some information here. You can scan this QR code to learn more. But if you want to go see firsthand what Kevin talked about today, the lean transformation underway at Appliance Park, it's a perfect opportunity to do that. We go visit First Build that we talked about during this webinar. So hope to see some of you in Kentucky for that tour at some point. With my pitching aside, my final thing is to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Thank you, of course, to Kevin and to Jim, but to all of you. This is a webinar that we've been looking forward to for a long time. Amazing to have Jim working on this project. Amazing to have Kevin joining us this afternoon to talk about the amazing story playing out there at Appliance Park in Louisville, Kentucky at GE Appliances. So thanks to them, thanks to you, and we'll see you next month for the webinar that we'll organize at that time. Until then, be well. We'll see you at the Gemba. Bye for now.